Hi, welcome to Empty Nest Creations. My name is Wendy. I'm the owner and creator here, and I want to thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today I'm bringing you 3 more thrift flips for the holidays. These are all pretty simple projects using items that I picked up at the thrift store. We'll be using some different products today. We will be using some IOD products, but we're also going to be using some different things, and I'll tell you where I got these products and where you can find them as well as we go through these projects. So with that, we're going to jump in to project number 1. Now this first project is some canisters that I picked up a few months ago at the thrift store, and they were a nice burgundy red color. And they have this like tan, kind of creamy colored edge around the lid and the top of the canister, and then on the very top of the knob on the top, there's a little bit of this creamy color. And for the holidays, I wanted to change this up and give it some shimmer. So I'm just going around and using some painter's tape to just make sure that we only get this gold embossing powder on the part that's the beige color here. So I'm just going to go, there's 2 canisters here. There's a small one and a large one, and I'm going to do the same thing for both of them. Just adding this tape around the edge. And then we're going to be using an embossing ink pad. So I got this off of Amazon. It's just an Amazon brand. And I'm just going to use the ink pad and just kind of wipe it on here, making sure that I got the embossing ink all the way around. And then I've got some gold embossing powder. And you basically just sprinkle it on and tap it off, kind of like glitter. And so I'm going to do that on the canister base and then around this lid. Now I'm getting it all on here, but I'm going to go back with a wet wipe and wipe it off that inner rim because I still want this to be able to close, and so I didn't want that embossing to be on that rim. So you'll see here I'm going to use a baby wipe and just come in and wipe that off, so that it's just on this part that will be on the outside. Now I'm going to ink up that top, just the part that's the beige, and then I'm going to sprinkle the embossing powder on there. Now once I get all that on, I'm going to use another baby wipe, and I'm going to go in and wipe off the powder anywhere that I don't want it. Just wiping it off. Because we don't want it, it shouldn't adhere without the embossing ink, but just to make sure I wipe it off. And you're going to need a heat tool, so you use a heat tool and you heat the embossing powder up, and you see right there it starts to change. It melts that embossing powder and it becomes really shiny. And so I'm going to remove the tape here before I use the heat tool. And as you watch, as it starts to heat up, it starts to change and gets really shiny. And this, when it cools off, it's hard. It's a really hard surface. So this is a nice way to add that gold shimmer to an object without paint. And it really dries hard, so it doesn't scratch off like a paint would. And these are still going to be food safe because this is all on the outside. So you want to make sure that all of it has melted. You don't want any of it, the powder, to remain. So you just, as you're heating it up, you just want to make sure that you're getting it all melted. And you'll be able to see it. It changes the it changes from a dull finish to a real shiny finish. This is a fun product to use. I have some embossing ink pens, and so you can write words and then sprinkle the powder on. But for something like this, the ink pad works really well. You can also use this with stamps. So you can ink up your stamp with the embossing ink pad and stamp it on your surface and sprinkle the embossing powder on and then heat it up with your tool. And you see there's some of that still dull. So I'm going to come back in and add a little more embossing powder. There was a couple of spots that it missed. So I'm just going to go in and touch up those spots that got missed. And you do want to wipe that ink off. If you get it somewhere that you don't want it before you put the powder on, go ahead and wipe it off. Because anywhere that ink is, it's going to adhere to the surface. And like I said, it dries hard once it's cured, and it's really difficult to get it off. So with that's done. I did the same on the small one and the large one, and now I'm going to be using some transfers on these. And this is the IOD Christmas Joy transfer. And I just went through and picked out a couple of images that I thought would look nice on these. Now these are, it's a curved surface, but it also is larger at the top than it is at the base. So it's pretty difficult to get these on without any cracks. So that you may get a few cracks in this transfer, but that's okay. So I'm just going to lay it down, and I just start on one side with my embossing tool and work my way around. Now these transfers adhere really well to this surface, but like I said, there, you can see a little bit there on the bottom where there's some extra space because it tapers at the bottom. And so I just, go from one side, and then I work my way into that middle section. And it did have a few cracks in it, but it looks fine. And then once you get it down, you want to burnish it, just rubbing over it to make sure that it's adhered really well. And I'll do the same thing on this large one. And I was having some difficulty with this one, getting it to, lay down. So I'm using some of my molds here. I'm going to lay them on the table and just lay that in between, and that helps it to just not roll around so much on me. And then I'll just use that transfer stick there to just rub that transfer down, and you can see it releasing. That carrier sheet just comes away as it attaches to the surface. And so you lift up, and anything that's not coming loose, just lay it back down and rub it some more, and it'll transfer onto the surface pretty easily. So this project was a pretty simple one. It didn't require a whole lot of updating, but just adding that gold really enhanced these and made them look a little more holiday worthy. So I burnished that one down, and then these are done. So let me know what you think about this project in the comments below. I'd really love to read your comments. I really appreciate all those comments that you all are leaving. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you would subscribe. I'm trying to put out at least one video each week. Most of my projects are going to be thrift flips and home decor. We'll be moving out of the holiday stuff pretty soon and into some other things. But this is my favorite time of the year. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, I'm really close to my 1,000 subscribers. That's my goal for this year. So if you can share this video, that may help me as well. But the more you comment and the more that you like these videos, the more YouTube will share them out. So I really appreciate all of that as well. I really like the way these turned out. Like I said, they're still food safe, so you can use these for Christmas treats or whatever you want to in your home. I think these turned out really pretty. And the IOD transfers have such a variety, so you can really find something for anyone's taste in these transfers. And if you're interested in purchasing any of the IOD transfers or molds that I use in these videos today, they are available on my website, emptynestcreation.com. So go check it out. And with that, we're going to move on to project 2. And in this project, I'm using some children's alphabet blocks. These are vintage. I've picked these up throughout the year at thrift stores, yard sales, estate sales, and I have a pretty large collection now, so I thought I would use some of these in some projects. So we're starting out with this little cutting board, and I ordered these for another project from Amazon, and I had quite a few of these. So this is just a really small size cutting board or breadboard. And I'm going to give this a coat of paint, and I'm only painting the one side and the edges. I'm leaving the back just that natural wood. And I'm using Fusion paint in the color Chateau. And so I'm going to give this a good coat of paint here. Now Fusion paint is an all-in-one paint, so this has a primer built in as well as a top coat, so you don't have to worry about sealing this once it's complete. So I'm going to give this a coat of paint, and we're going to use a paint inlay on this one. I'm using the 12th Night paint inlay from IOD. And so I've just got this one that says Tidings of Joy. And so you put down a layer of wet paint. And you saw I misted that. I turned it paint side up and gave it a mist of water. And then I'm going to put a wet coat of paint down on the board. And then you lay this paint side down into that wet paint. And I'm just rubbing it in. I mist it again. And then I take a towel and just dab up the excess water, but I'm also going around and making sure that all of that painted section on this inlay is pressed into that wet paint. That I found is key to getting a good impression on your piece. Now let it dry. Once it's dry, you mist it with the water again. Let it sit for about 30 seconds, and then you just peel it away. And I got a really good impression on this one. So it does have some of those lines where you can see where the paper of that inlay was. So I'm just taking some Chateau paint and I'm just going around in kind of a dabbing motion and stippling the paint around there to get rid of that line. And then I will come back in once this is all dry, and you'll see in just a minute. I'm going to use a sanding block and some sandpaper and kind of distress it a little bit. I'm using those vintage blocks that you can see at the top of the screen there. I'll be using those vintage blocks, and so I didn't want this to look brand new. So I am going to age it up a little bit, just scuffing up the edges there, removing some of that paint. And I started out with an 80 grit sandpaper, and then I'm going to switch it out and come back with a 220 and just really smooth everything out. This paint self-levels, so there's really not any brush marks on here, but I did want to kind of smooth out any of the scratches that lower grit sandpaper put on there. So now I've got these blocks, and they spell out the word elf, and I have two sets here. I'm going to make two different ones of these, and so I'm using a combination of E6000 and hot glue to just glue these blocks together so that they spell out elf. Now I had these little elf figurines that I picked up. I can't remember where I got these, but I had a whole set of them, and so I'm just using these, putting one elf on each one, and then these little bottle brush trees I got off of Amazon, and so I'm going to add those as well. And again, I'm just using a little bit of E6000, a little bit of hot glue to glue these together. And so one of these little sets I'm going to glue on to the front of this board, just to make a shelf sitter. So I made a whole bunch of these little displays, and some of them have the board on the back, and some of them are just the blocks with the figurines on them. I also had some of those old vintage wood ornaments that I used on these. So I think these turned out really cute. It's just a cute little piece that you can display. So here's the one without the board, and this is small enough that you can just put it in on any shelf or on any vignette that you put together, just to add a little vintage flair. And then this one has the board attached to the back. I love these little elf figurines. I think they're so cute. So let me know in the comments below what you think about these little shelf sitters. I really think these turned out really precious. And with that, we're going to move on to our final project for today. This is project 3, and I picked up these little tin Christmas trees at the thrift store last week. They were they're just little metal ones, and it looks like someone had already put a coat of milk paint or something on them, but I'm going to update these as well. So here you see they're galvanized tin, and they had a coat of some like a grayish beige paint on them. Not very Christmassy. They were very plain. So I'm going to use some DIY paint, and this is Salty Kiss, and this covers really well on this metal, and it adheres really well to this metal. So I'm going to paint both of the trees in this Salty Kiss color. This is a clay-based paint, and it adheres to pretty much anything, but it adheres really well to this metal. And I just put one coat on each of these. And now I'm going to come in with some, this is silk paint, and it's in the color Black Sands. And I'm going to give the base 2 coats of this paint. And so I'm just going, doing the base, and I go up a little bit inside there, just so you don't see any of that galvanized metal or that other paint color. Wanted to make sure all of that was covered so that you couldn't see any of that. Now here I used the Winter Forage mold and some quick casting resin. And I just used the holly and berries here. And when I took it out of the mold, I laid it on here and kind of formed it around the tree. When it's, before it's completely cured, it is pliable and you can bend it around. So I did that, used some tape to just hold it on so that it would cure in the shape of these trees, because I wanted it to kind of wrap around the edges. And so I'm just using some quick setting glue here, and I'll use the activator spray. And I did overdo the glue a little bit on here, so you'll see in a minute that some of it ran down the front, got all over my hands as well. I just noticed that run, so I'm going to try to wipe that off a little bit, and then I'm just going to use the activator to spray it, and then we'll do the other one. And now I put one of these holly and berries on the right side of the tree, and on the other one I'm putting it on the left side of the tree. Now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to cover these castings with that same Salty Kiss paint. I'm going to come back in and paint it with another color, but I wanted to make sure that anywhere it was touching the tree would be that Salty Kiss color. And now I'm coming in with the color Eden. This is another DIY paint, and I'm going to paint all those leaves in that Eden color. But covering it in the Salty Kiss just ensured that I don't have to be super careful about painting the sides of these leaves. Anywhere where it touches the tree would be that Salty Kiss color, and so it'll just blend in. So I'm painting the stems and the leaves in this green. And I do this with both trees. And then once I have these painted, I'm going to come back in and paint the berries. One way you can help me to grow my channel is just by sharing this video. So if you'll share it on your other social medias, that will really help my channel to grow and help me reach that 1,000 subscribers that I'm shooting for. I'd really appreciate that if you could do that. So here I'm coming in with the color Cardinal Red. This is another DIY paint. And I just am using a really fine tip brush here and coming in and painting all of those berries in this pretty red color. Now the DIY paint does need to be sealed. So once these are dry, I take them outside and just use a spray sealer in a flat finish to seal that paint in, because DIY paint can be reactivated with water, and so you want to make sure that you seal it with something. And the easiest thing for me to do for these was to just use a spray sealer. So once that's done, these berries are painted, I'll seal them up, and then this project will be finished. I think these turned out really, really cute. They're nice and simple. And I love the way they turned out. Let me know what you think about these simple trees. I've never seen trees like these before. I thought they were really different and unique. And I think that this paint color just made them a little more festive. And with that, this video is done. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. I really appreciate you taking your time to watch my video and to comment and to share. And again, if you haven't already subscribed, click that subscribe button, click the bell so you'll be notified when I upload a new video. I really appreciate all of you, and I'll see you in the next video.